I ultimately dismantled a corporate giant, watched it get acquired by its biggest rival, and bought their old office building as a trophy. And it all started when they told me to my face that my employees' life-saving surgery didn't matter. My story began before the pandemic and only recently concluded. I've always been a simple guy who enjoys a quiet life, though I was born with the proverbial silver spoon in my mouth. As the black sheep and middle child of my family, I learned to get by with a bit of my own brainpower and a healthy dose of luck. Thanks to my parents' connections, I attended lucrative schools, served in the military up to the rank of captain, and was then sent abroad for college. After my studies, I took a government job, again, thanks to family connections, but after a few years, I leveraged my family's name to meet people who helped me set up several of my own businesses in the coastal city where I live. The capital came from a mix of allowances, a small inheritance from my late grandmother, and a fund my parents started for me as a baby. My businesses thrived, thanks to our city being a major tourist hub. As a business owner, I make sure my staff are well cared for. They're all on salary with comprehensive medical, dental, and optical insurance, on top of the national healthcare scheme. As one online commenter pointed out, hearing about an employer who cares so much for their employees is honestly refreshing. I also provide benefits that go beyond the legal requirements, like 30 days of annual leave instead of the mandatory 21, paid overtime, and unhindered medical leave for serious conditions like surgery or chemo. The incident that set everything off involved one of my most valued employees, a brilliant older woman named Eleanor who had risen to the rank of manager and was adored by everyone. She informed me she needed to have a hysterectomy. Her mother had passed away from cervical cancer, and given that she already had 4 children, this was the most logical preventative step. She did her due diligence, found a private hospital covered by our insurance, and we secured all the necessary pre-authorizations from the insurer. When she applied for leave, I rejected her request to use her normal vacation days. I wanted her to use the unlimited medical leave so she could take as much time as she needed to recover without worrying about her salary or using up her personal time. The procedure was a success, and her recovery was quick. A few months later, Eleanor came to my office looking utterly distraught. My first fear was that her tests had come back with bad news, but the truth was far worse. The hospital had handed her a massive bill because our insurance company, Goliath Assurance, had refused to pay. Their reason? The procedure was supposedly not in the scope of her cover. We were all livid. We had followed every rule and gotten every pre-approval. I immediately sent my accounts manager to the local Goliath Assurance office to sort it out. He returned fuming. He told me that after he presented all the evidence and documentation, the insurance representatives essentially told him to get lost. Fine. If they wanted to play hardball, I'd play. I drove over to their office myself to get a clear answer. After making me wait for an entire hour in their lobby, a receptionist had the audacity to inform me that their visiting director from the head office was too busy to meet with me. This was the first critical mistake, born from the fatal flaw that permeates so many large corporations, the arrogance to believe that their size makes them immune to the concerns of the little guy. Pissed off doesn't even begin to cover it. I flew 2 hours to the capital city and went straight to their head office. The response there was just as dismissive. They informed me that they had recently revised their policy and that this procedure was no longer covered. I asked when this revision happened. "A month ago," the representative said coolly. I pointed out that Eleanor's surgery was 5 months prior, and we had the pre-authorization to prove it. Their comeback was that the policy change was retrospective for the last 12 months. When I asked why a client holding numerous policies with them, was never informed, they told me they had notified their large clients and would get around to the rest of us when our policies were up for renewal. The sheer disrespect was breathtaking. I demanded to speak to the vice president, and they boldly told me he had no time for me. Then came the words that sealed their fate, delivered verbatim. "We are a large company and have no time to argue semantics with low-end clients. If you don't like it, you can frankly leave and find a new insurance company." The representative delivered the line with smug finality, completely unaware that they hadn't just dismissed a customer, they had signed their company's death warrant. That was it. The rage that had been simmering inside me went into overdrive. Someone on the internet later commented on my story, saying, "This is the type of EFFU money I'd love to have. Making it a case of EFF with my people and I'll F you harder is even more delicious." They were right. In that moment, I decided they would get exactly what they asked for. I flew home, went straight to the hospital, and paid Eleanor's entire bill myself. She was mortified and insisted on paying me back, but I refused. It wasn't her fault, and I'd be damned if I let her pay for their corruption. As another person later wrote, somebody born with a silver spoon in their mouth but is a tremendous advocate for their employees and people around them. You're a modern-day hero. I don't see it as heroic. I see it as doing what's right. After cooling down for a few days, I met with my directors. Those words, low-end clients, were still ringing in my ears. I asked them to find me a new insurance provider. We found a rival, Aegis Health, who offered us a far superior deal. Not only did it include comprehensive medical, dental, and optical, but it also added mental health cover, physiotherapy, rehabilitative services, coverage for mobility devices, and even death and funeral benefits, all for a slightly higher but entirely worthwhile price. When I went back to the local Goliath Assurance office to cancel my policy, the staff seemed completely unfazed, thinking I was just pulling a single small business. They watched me go with a shrug, convinced they'd just lost an insignificant account. They had no idea they weren't just losing a client, they were about to lose everything. Their expressions changed when I returned with my lawyer and a team of people carrying several large boxes of documents. What Goliath Assurance had failed to realize was that I didn't just own one small restaurant. I owned 3 of the most popular bars in the city, a cab company, a hotel resort, a commercial cleaning service, a security guard service, and several rental buildings across the country. The puzzled looks on their faces slowly morphed into shock, then awe, then outright panic as my lawyer formally announced who I was and the full scope of what was happening. When they heard my family name, the color drained from their faces. It was an extremely satisfying sight. Suddenly, they couldn't do enough for me. The pleading started, the apologies flowed. The news shot up the corporate ladder so fast it created a sonic boom. The head office dispatched a delegation, their chief legal officer, their chief financial officer, their president, and the very same director who had been too busy to see me before. I even got a personalized call from their CEO, who was traveling abroad. It was too little, too late. No amount of groveling or sweet-talking was going to change my mind. Over the next 6 weeks, we systematically severed every last tie with Goliath Assurance. My friends and family, hearing about the incident, were equally disgusted and pulled all of their businesses as well. The financial hit Goliath Assurance took was massive. When the COVID pandemic hit, they were already barely floating. Soon after, they went into receivership and were unceremoniously acquired by their greatest rival, Aegis Health, the very company I had moved to. The top executives were given their golden parachutes and forced to resign, and most of their employees were retained by the new company, except for the senior executives, including the ones who told my manager to buzz off. And in a final, cruel twist of irony, the building their local office had operated from was put up for sale. You can probably guess who bought it. That's right, I did. I'm remodeling it into a business rental space right now. This whole saga is a potent reminder that everyone is human and deserves respect. Underestimating people because they seem small or low-end can be a catastrophic miscalculation because, as the saying goes, karma is a cold and heartless witch. What's the most outrageous example of corporate arrogance you've ever witnessed, and how was it handled?